The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us. Tonight we'd like to start off by saying thank you to those of you who left us a review and a comment. It really means a lot to us. Now, it might seem like such a small, trivial thing, but like we've mentioned before, those comments and reviews really make a big difference for our podcast when you leave us a rating. And don't just do it for us. Do it for all the podcasts that you follow. It's recognition for long hours of researching and writing a show, and then recording and editing and putting it all together. You know, we take a lot of pride in what we do, so that simple gesture really helps all of your favorite podcasts grow and thrive.
It really does. And for those of you that have purchased our merchandise on TeePublic in recent weeks, thank you. And we've also noticed some new subscribers to our premium bonus episodes, so we thank you for that too. Everyone's support in all of these different ways really means a lot to us.
It really does. And you know what? It's been such a long week shopping and getting ready for Christmas. So it feels really great to sit down, relax, and get back in the studio. So with that said, sit back, get comfy, and Beth, why don't you tell everyone where your mind wandered for tonight's episode?
All right. Well, I realized that we haven't covered a UFO story for a few months now, so I thought I'd cover one tonight.
Yeah, it has been a few months, hasn't it?
I think it's since September that we've done a UFO show.
That long ago.
Yeah. So this one doesn't involve school children like our Ariel school episode, or kindly aliens grilling breakfast food like our Joe Simonton alien pancake episode, but it does include an alien craft being sighted by commercial pilots and some unexplainable crop circles.
You know, not that I'd mind that an alien comes into my backyard and cooks me some pancakes, even if they're not that great.
They didn't look that great.
You didn't have to cook them.
Well, this one doesn't have pancakes, but it's just as intriguing. Intriguing, I said. Intriguing. I thought alien and said anyway.
Yeah, I see the confusion there.
I know. So here we go. On December 21st, 1978, pilots Vern Powell and Ian Peary and 4 passengers aboard a Safe Air Limited airplane were flying near the Kaikoura mountain range from Blenheim to Christchurch on the South Island of New Zealand. Suddenly, they noticed very bright lights following their plane. They watched for several minutes as a very large UFO with 5 brilliant lights tracked along beside them. They continued to watch the craft, which showed up on their radar, as it dropped 5 brilliantly lighted discs. Some were reportedly as big as a house. The other smaller ones flashed their lights. The Wellington air traffic controller confirmed that they saw something on their radar, too. When they reported what they saw, Leonard Lee, who was a Channel 10 producer out of Melbourne, got a hold of one of his reporters who just happened to be on vacation in Christchurch. His name was Quentin Fogarty, And together with Wellington cameraman David Crockett and his wife Ngatea, the group boarded a plane to see what they could capture in the sky around the Kaikoura Range, just 9 days later, on December 30th.
Now, I wonder if that guy gets a lot of shit for
being named David Crockett?
Yeah.
I know, I thought that too. But that's an American folk hero. You know, they probably don't learn a lot about Davy Crockett in New Zealand.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. The plane, piloted by Bill Startup and Bob Gard, was making a scheduled run between Wellington and Christchurch to deliver a cargo of newspapers. Not long after takeoff, they noticed unexplained lights too. Pilot Startup was so taken aback that he shouted at the news crew to get footage. The lights eventually disappeared. Understandably shaken, they did land safely, unload their newspapers, and take off again at 2:16 a.m. Just 3 minutes into their return flight at about 2,000 feet, a strange light reappeared. It was very bright and very round, like an orb, and it too showed up on the plane's radar. They managed to catch it on film, as it appeared to follow their plane for 15 minutes. On the accompanying audio, you can hear Quentin Fogarty say, quote, "Let's hope they're friendly."
Well, yeah, 15 minutes is a long time to be followed.
Yeah. They reported what they saw as well, and they were met with vicious skepticism. Experts claimed it was nothing more than lights reflecting off of squid boats, or it was Venus. Maybe it was lights from a train bouncing off of the clouds, or it was illegal drug runners. The mockery of their sighting was incredibly harsh. Even though the New Zealand military secretly and officially classified it as a UFO of unknown cause or origin. The mockery had to be doubly frustrating, since just 6 years earlier, another intriguing UFO encounter had occurred. It was 7:30 p.m. on September 4th, 1969. Another plane, this one a Straits Air Freight Express, was making a scheduled flight over New Zealand's North Island when the pilots reported a strange pulsating light. It was blue. Earlier that same day, a farmer named Bert O'Neill was outside, just walking around his land near the town of Ngatea, when he noticed something a little odd. A perfectly round patch of green manuka trees appeared to have tips that were now completely dead and bleached silver. But even more odd were the 3 deep indentations in the ground in the middle of the circle. O'Neill definitely thought it was strange, but he didn't say anything to local police. Instead, he mentioned it a few nights later at a dinner party. The conversation bounced back and forth from the pilot sightings to O'Neill's dead trees, and some jokes were made about visiting Martians. One guest took it a little more seriously and thought that they had to be connected. They contacted the president of the Tauranga Science Space Research Group, who was named Harvey Cook. Cook, who also must have taken it seriously, set out immediately for O'Neill's farm to conduct an investigation. He documented some pretty interesting stuff. First, the 3 depressions made an almost equilateral triangle that was 10 feet on 2 sides and 9 on the 3rd side. From his calculations of the soil displacement, each impression had to have been made by almost 45,000 pounds of simultaneous pressure.
That's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot. And I was trying to think, even farm equipment, if it's got 3 legs and it's 10 feet on 2 sides and 9, the triangle's not perfect, what sort of farm equipment would weigh 45,000 pounds?
That I don't know.
I don't either, because that's one of the theories, and I'll get to that in a second. He also believed that whatever landed there had toes on each of the 3 landing pods that spread out after it made contact with the ground. The holes left by these toes were each 4 to 5 feet deep. Thirdly, he noted that whatever had landed had to be so heavy that it actually broke the roots of the manuka trees that were closest to it. Baffled, Cook took soil samples and meticulously sketched out the impressions before getting in touch with the University of Auckland's UFO research group. Some of the experts, including horticulturists, suggested that the dead trees and the impressions were made by one of O'Neill's neighbors while they were spraying weed killer on his property. The neighbor was questioned and denied using any weed killer anywhere near there. So that's why I was thinking farm equipment, like if they did put something there and then they had a huge tank and they were spraying weed killer.
Right.
But the research group decided to rule it out anyway. Expecting to find nothing more than weed-killing chemicals, horticultural expert John Stuart Menzies brought a Geiger counter out to the trees. He was surprised to note high levels of shortwave radiation. When he tested foliage samples he collected, he found, quote, some kind of shortwave high-frequency radiation has cooked the material from the inside outwards. The effect appears to have been instantaneous. The energy received has reduced the pith to black carbon without the outsides showing any signs of burning. I know of no earthly source of energy which could have produced these effects. A meteorite or lightning couldn't do this, and it has been too sudden for combustion. Some outside object appears to have landed on the spot and in taking off emitted the energy which cooked the plants. End quote. By now, the media had shown up at O'Neill's farm. One reporter for the Thames Star, Kingsley Field, said that he was also baffled by the crop circle, which was really more of a triangle, but we'll call it a crop circle, which was in the middle of the trees, and the dinner plate-sized impressions in the ground. Each impression had a cross in the center and a hole in the middle of that. With the media came curious bystanders and UFO enthusiasts. Thousands of them, just traipsing all over O'Neill's farm. The interest lasted for months, causing incredible traffic and a strain on the town. Plus, it completely contaminated the site to the point that when the government officials did come out to investigate, there wasn't really much left to see. But their official report cited the cause of the dead trees as a fungus. Their report made zero mention of the crop circle, nor did it address the fact that the specific fungus, they noted, will attack already dead trees, but it doesn't cause trees to die.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now, not long after O'Neill spotted the crop circle in his field, another farm experienced something kind of weird. About an hour away from Ngatea on Pukatutu Island, the Blackmore family noticed their cows were suddenly refusing to drink from a pond that they had always drank from. The reeds on the island in the center of the pond were inexplicably flattened into a perfect circle, about 82 feet wide. The reeds also appeared to be burned and flattened into a spiral pattern. In the center were 3 deep impressions. Back on the North Island, in the town of Dargaville, a family reported a strange object in the sky. They said it looked like some sort of torpedo-shaped aircraft, but it was on fire and it had flames shooting out of the back. The next day, 4 additional crop circles were discovered on a hill. Each one of those was about 16 feet in diameter. Eventually, the UFO flap died down, and tourists finally left Bert O'Neill's farm, and the town of Ngatea went back to normal. For 6 years at least, until the passengers and the pilots of the Safe Air Limited airplane saw the strange lights in the sky near the Kaikoura Mountains. So, UFO sightings on both the South and North Islands of New Zealand have never really stopped. Just check out YouTube or type in a Google search and you can find countless reports. So, despite the media backlash against the passengers of those airplanes in 1975, and despite the silly explanations given for O'Neill's crop circle in 1969, I think it's safe to say that there was something going on there. Whether it's extraterrestrial or not, who knows? But it was definitely strange. Hey, did you know? For all of you who worry that Santa might get sick of milk and cookies on Christmas Eve, don't worry. In England, it's more likely sherry than milk. In Ireland, he's left a pint of Guinness and a mince pie. In the Netherlands, where Santa swaps out his reindeer for horses, children leave hay and carrots. And in Denmark, some children leave out rice pudding, but not for Santa. The rice pudding is for the elves in the attic. So, don't worry. With all those yummy snacks and various beverages, Santa and his helpers have a pretty good night. Who'da thunk it?
You know, I'm thinking Santa's really got to like stopping off in Ireland.
I know, a pint of Guinness and a mince pie at almost every house. That's the way to live.
Pretty good.
I know. And good thing the reindeer know the way, because
Santa wouldn't after drinking that much.
Wonder if he does a little sleigh breathalyzer while he's up there.
Who's going to stop Santa?
Oh, nobody. But it is a good thing that the reindeer know the way.
That it is.
Good old trusty Rudolph. So, my dear, what are you talking about this evening?
Well, way back when we started our podcast, one of our earliest episodes featured a story on the Green Children of Woolpit, a young brother and his sister who showed up in a town with unexplainable green skin.
I remember that. Seems like a long time ago, but that was one of your stories.
Yeah, it was in the 1700s, and the story of the Green Children has taken on some elements of legend at this point. But what if I told you that in 1975, a child was brought into a hospital with unexplainable blue skin?
Huh, in 1975?
Yeah.
Huh.
Now, it doesn't seem that long ago, at least to me.
Well, no, that was the year I was born.
Right.
It's not that long ago.
In 1975, staff at the University of Kentucky Medical Center were concerned when Benji Stacy was brought in just hours after his birth. Benji was deep blue from head to toe, so blue, in fact, that his skin was almost purple. Doctors rushed in to help the newborn, who they believed was in medical distress. So imagine their disbelief and confusion when they realized that Benji was 100% healthy. There wasn't a single thing wrong with him. He wasn't suffering from late stages of hypothermia. He wasn't suffocating or deprived of oxygen. And he didn't have high levels of silver in his blood. Oh, and by the way, his skin had not been dyed blue.
Wow.
Stumped, doctors turned to Benji's family members, unsure what to tell them. But it was Benji's grandmother who had something to tell them. Perhaps Benji was blue because of his great-grandmother. Now, it's not what you're thinking. No one harmed Benji in any way, and especially not Luna Fugate, his great-grandmother. You see, Luna Fugate was also blue. Perhaps Benji's grandmother proposed Benji had inherited his blue skin from her. After all, Luna Fugate was one of the blue-skinned people of Troublesome Creek. And Blue Fugates had lived in Kentucky as far back as the 1830s.
That's so strange.
Yeah, they had been there for a while.
Huh.
So it all began with Martin Fugate, a French immigrant who arrived in Kentucky in 1820. Martin was an orphan and he knew very little about his family history. But he did know something about the importance of owning his own land. And so when Kentucky offered land grants to anyone who could successfully homestead the land, Martin took his chance in the mountains of Appalachia. Kentucky had only been a state for 30 years when Martin arrived, and he staked his claims on the bank of Troublesome Creek in Knott County. And because the land was so isolated, he had very few neighbors. The creek, by the way, was named Troublesome Creek due to its highly impenetrable game trails. So it was a rough spot to make a go of it. But that didn't deter Martin. He settled in, and other families did also, including the Smiths, the Combs, the Richies, and the Stacys. Before long, Martin married a daughter of the Smith family, a pretty redhead named Elizabeth. And although the area was so remote that neighbors could go months without seeing each other, Martin and Elizabeth made a home for themselves. Within a decade, they had 7 children. 3 of their children had skin as pale and as fair as their mother's. The other 4 did not. 4 of the 7 Fugate children were blue.
Huh. That's just so mind-boggling to me every time you say it.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
Although the Fugates were definitely isolated in their Kentucky hollow, people began to whisper. Before long, though, it was inevitable that everyone knew about the Blue Fugates. People were superstitious in 1830, and rumors spread that the blue children had to be children of the devil, or at the very least, they were a race no one had ever seen before. Now, as you can imagine, Martin and Elizabeth wanted to protect their children and keep them sheltered away from all the hateful gossip, and so they stayed in their holler. As the blue children grew into healthy young men and women, they still shied away from the outsiders, afraid that their skin would be ridiculed. All of them chose to stay right along Troublesome Creek or Ball Creek, and they married family members of their closest neighbors. Pretty soon, there were even more blue children. And as prejudice against them grew, the Fugates avoided outsiders even more and married within their own families even more. For example, one of Martin and Elizabeth's sons, Zachariah, married his mother's sister. One of Zachariah's sons, Levi, married a girl from the Ritchie family, and they had 8 children, one of which they named Luna. Now, Luna had blue skin, and she married John E. Stacy. The constant intermarriage lasted for over 100 years before roads and trains made travel in and out of the holler much easier, and the families could meet other people. Gradually, the blue-skinned people of Kentucky seemed to fade away, or at the very least, not as many new descendants were born with blue skin. Well, that's until 1975, of course, when Benji Stacy was brought to the hospital. Luna and John were his great-grandparents, by the way. So, what was happening there? How did generations of a family that now included the Stacys and the Richies end up with blue skin? Well, it wasn't easy to figure out. As I said before, the Fugates weren't too keen about letting outsiders into their hollers. And you really can't blame them, because they had been ostracized and demonized for decades.
I know. Who can blame them for wanting to stay isolated and just be with neighbor families that were kind to them? And
right. It only makes sense.
Yeah. Why would you branch out?
They're protecting their children.
Right.
But in the 1960s, a nurse named Ruth Pendergrass found herself face to face with a blue woman who had come into the local American Heart Association, and she was at the clinic for a blood test. Ruth wondered if the blue-skinned people all suffered from some sort of heart or lung disorder, but since many of them lived into their 90s, she didn't see how that could make any sense. Intrigued, she teamed up with a young doctor named Madison Kawine from the University of Kentucky. The two of them decided to seek out as many blue-skinned people as they could so they could try to figure it all out. Now, Dr. Kawine may have been young, but he was an excellent hematologist. He had helped create a medication to fight Parkinson's disease, and he isolated the antidote for cholera, so he certainly had the expertise to isolate whatever was causing blue skin. But on the other hand, he didn't have the expertise to track down or interact with any blue skin people. He drove 8 hours every day just to get from the university to Troublesome Creek. He and Nurse Pendergrass spent weeks trying to meet any of the Fugates or Troublesome Creek families. They would get pretty close sometimes, literally chasing them through the hollers, but they could never actually catch up with any of them to talk to them. Then one day, something remarkable happened. Blue-skinned siblings, Rachel and Patrick Ritchie, walked into Nurse Pendergrass's clinic. Although the two appeared incredibly uncomfortable in the public clinic, the siblings were hoping for answers. Dr. Kawine was determined to find them some. First, he tested them for heart disease. When that came up negative, he tested their blood for everything he could think of. Frustrated but undeterred, the doctor scoured all kinds of medical journals until he came across an article about the blue-skinned people in Alaska. It turns out that it was an enzyme deficiency that caused their skin to turn blue, and through intensive genealogical mapping and blood tests, Dr. Kawine was able to isolate the recessive gene that seemed to be the culprit. Unbeknownst to Martin and Elizabeth Fugate, all those years ago in 1830, the two of them carried a recessive gene that caused something called methemoglobinemia.
That's a scary word. I'm glad you had to say it and not me.
Yeah, I gotta admit, that one wasn't easy with my tongue.
It wouldn't be easy to say for anyone. That was quite the long word. That was like a supercalifragilistic kind of medical term.
Yeah, but for you have no problem with your theater background saying all these tongue twisters. This one was really difficult.
It was a tough one. I'll give you that for sure.
So, because their family had been isolated in that one small part of Kentucky, their descendants had continued to pass on the recessive gene. Basically, they lacked an enzyme called diapherase, which naturally stops hemoglobin from producing too much methemoglobin. Everyone has methemoglobin in their blood, but at very, very low levels, less than 1%. Now, with that said, the Fugates, their levels were closer to 10 or 20%. This high level wasn't medically harmful at all, but it did cause their red hemoglobin to struggle at transporting oxygen, which turned their blood into a chocolate brown color and turned their skin blue.
Huh.
Now, Dr. Kawine believed that if he injected the siblings with some sort of electron donor, he could counteract the high levels of methemoglobin. He felt that methylene blue was the most obvious choice. The Ritchie siblings and their families, however, were not convinced. They reasonably wondered how injecting something blue into their bodies would make them less blue.
Well, it makes sense. I would wonder the same thing.
Yeah, I could see their fear.
Yeah, I mean, if your skin's already blue and somebody wants to inject something blue into you, I would be questioning it as well.
But with a lot of convincing, Dr. Kawine did get Rachel and Patrick to agree to the injections. Rather than make them come to the clinic, he traveled to their cabin in Hardburley. All it took was 100 milligrams of methylene blue, and within mere minutes, both siblings' skin began to lose its blue hue.
That's amazing.
It's truly amazing. And what's even more amazing is that he gave them daily tablets to take, and their skin, it didn't revert back to the blue.
Wow. All that time, that they hid away I don't know when methylene blue was invented, or I don't even really know what it is, but I'm glad that the two of them came forward and said, can you help us?
Yeah. And it was all made possible because Dr. Kawine and those brave siblings that a greater understanding of recessive genes and hereditary traits happened.
That's so cool.
Isn't it, though?
Yeah.
And I feel so bad for them. And I guess it's better late than never that they actually made it into a clinic.
Right.
And they got to the root cause of it. But I do feel sorry for their families that suffered all those years because of all the ridicule they'd gotten from everyone.
Right. I mean, they basically, like you said, they isolated themselves from everyone.
Pretty much inbreeding.
Right. Exactly. And then just passing it on to more of the kids.
Right.
Yeah.
But there is a happy ending to this story.
Yeah, it's really,
and
really
some medical
cool.
breakthroughs.
And absolutely, it sounds like medical breakthroughs. Because when I was in school, I remember doing one science unit, and it was all about dominant and recessive traits.
Right.
And I remember having just to map our family eye color to see why my siblings and why we had the color eyes that we had.
Right.
And I always thought that was fascinating. So here it is applied to real life, and it accomplished something pretty remarkable.
I wonder if any way they missed their blue skin. It'd be so strange to live all those years with blue skin.
Yeah.
And then it's gone. Just like that.
Well, I guess if they stopped taking the medication, it would come back.
That it would.
Right. I think there was a guy, too. He was on talk shows and stuff, but his was because of silver. It was some sort of
colloidal silver?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, there's that. It's a side effect. Long-term use.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. That was pretty cool. I'd never heard of them.
Yeah, it's those little things that you find sometimes just surfing the internet.
Yeah, I know.
Like the green children
of Woolpit. Yeah.
They were quite interesting. And if you haven't heard that episode, check it out.
Yeah, I said earlier that you had done that story, but I honestly can't remember which one of us did it, if it was me or you. But it's out there somewhere early in our podcast history.
Yeah, I'm not sure what episode it is.
I didn't look it up. I don't know. Well, anyway, if you would like to know more about the Ngatea and Kaikoura, New Zealand UFO sightings and the crop circles, or if you would like to know even more about the blue-skinned people of Kentucky,
check out our show notes.
Check out our sources in our show notes for a jumping off point so that you can jump down the rabbit hole yourselves.
Yeah, and drive yourself crazy like we do.
I know.
Because we'll just be on the internet, and then next thing you know, we're finding a topic for a new show.
Right. Well, didn't you say earlier you were trying to find more about the people in Alaska with blue skin?
Right.
And you spent, probably an hour at least trying to find something about them?
Hour and a half scouring through what I thought were leads, from medical journals, and it just turned out nothing came up.
Yeah.
It was pretty much a waste of time. I thought by the end, I'm going to come out with something, a tidbit. Absolutely nothing.
That's what we do for our listeners.
Yeah, that's what we do. And we do enjoy it.
Yes, we do it because we like to.
Well, I guess that's enough of us babbling on and on and on.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
So, with that said, join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon.